Thursday Night Football is now Amazon's Prime night of football because every Thursday Night Football game is only on Prime Video. Beginning tonight, watch the NFL's biggest stars compete every Thursday night of the season. And to kick things off, two of the NFL's most exciting teams battle it out as the Los Angeles Chargers travel to Kansas City to take on the Chiefs. Watch the games on any device and visit Amazon.com/TNF for more. The new era of Thursday Night Football is officially here, and it's only on Prime Video. Restrictions apply. See Amazon.com/Amazon Prime for details.
Blue Wire.
First pick in the 1991 NBA Draft, the Charlotte Hornets select Larry Johnson from University.
I'm not supposed to be here, man. A lot of people from where I'm from, don't make it.
Charlotte, we're back.
All right, welcome into another Buzz Beat, a Charlotte Hornets podcast. This is Richie, and thanks for everyone for the support so far. If you want to continue to support us, visit the link in the episode notes about Buzz Beat Plus, which is $35 for the year, and you get ad-free episodes, exclusive content, and early access to episodes, hours, and even sometimes days before it gets to the public feed. Also, if you are a subscriber, make sure you listen and watch the video on Scoot Henderson on our most recent pod, and keep sharing our stuff on social media. Without your support, we definitely wouldn't be where we are today. So joining us today on today's podcast, today's episode, we've got a guest to chat about the Hornets and their lackluster offseason. We've got James Plowright, otherwise known as British Buzz on Twitter. James, thanks so much. How's it going?
It's going great. Thanks for having me on. I've been a long-time BuzzBeat listener, so I wanted to tick off the list for finally coming on. And looking forward to chatting about the Hornets offseason here.
There won't be much to talk about, but we will try. But before we get into that, you being a Man U fan and me being an Arsenal fan, their most recent game, they actually played against each other most recently. I do have a question for you. What did you think of that VAR decision at midfield?
Look, VAR gets a bad rap. I think it was the right decision. I think Arsenal were better than Man United in that game, and it flattered us to win whatever it was 3-1. But I think it was the right decision. You may disagree.
No, I definitely think it was a foul. I guess the one thing that I struggle with VAR is like, how far can they go back? Obviously, it was a pretty quick kind of dispossession and a change of possession there, and Arsenal scored fairly quickly off of that. But what if the possession had ended in a corner kick, and then Arsenal scored off the corner? They wouldn't have checked it then, right?
No, absolutely not. It has to be involved in the direct phase of play. There's some weird referee lingo wording in there. So I think, direct phase of play, which if it had gone out for a corner, then that would have been a new phase. And then that's why you wouldn't go back. But for the average fan, no one knows these things. And you don't want to go reading the VAR guidelines if you just want to sit down and watch a soccer game. So it's complicated for everybody.
Yeah, that's why I just find it so problematic, because it ended in a goal. They were able to kind of go back to that point and look at it. But yeah, regardless, I would agree with you. I think Arsenal looked more threatening. They were, I guess, the better team. But obviously in sports, things happen and unlucky bounces here and there. But we will go ahead and transition our thoughts to the Hornets and take a look back on the offseason that was for them. It basically consists of drafting Mark Williams and signing Cody Matin. But before we get into the big picture stuff, what are your thoughts on the signing? What were your thoughts then, or what are your thoughts now on the signing of Cody Matin to those 4 years, $32 million contract?
I think it's perfectly reasonable. And I think the fourth year it came out was a team option or non-guaranteed, one of the two, which I think, you like it even better. And I think especially for Steve Clifford, Cody Matin is probably the most Steve Clifford-esque player on the roster. And he is the team's best pound-for-pound defender. We saw that last year. And he's just low maintenance, will do his role really well. If the three-point shooting kind of hovers around where it is, then I think he's the perfect player. he's strange. Like on a very good team, I think you could even see Cody Matin starting. You know, if he was on like the Brooklyn Nets and you had Kyrie and Durant and stuff like that, you could even see like Cody Matin starting as just like a pure defense hustle guy, which he's probably not going to start on the Hornets, even though the Hornets aren't quite at that level just because of the makeup of the roster. But I think he's just the perfect guy you want to have around. And I just think he's a really solid, reliable personality. And I think the Hornets want to have that in the part of the program right now.
Yeah, you're right about that contract being unguaranteed, non-guaranteed for that fourth year. So for whatever reason, if they needed to get off that $8 million in the 25-26 season, they could definitely do that. But yeah, Cody Matin definitely got, I guess, significantly better from behind the arc compared to his first two seasons last year, shooting close to 40%. I do wonder how much of that can be sustained this season, because a lot of that unlocks what he can do on the offensive end. If he's knocking down that shot, that helps him with his driving ability. He really likes to get to the rim. That's definitely his preference. And I think that shot helps him get into the lane off of a pump fake, drawing defenders. He's one of the most underrated players on this team with that dump off pass to the dunker spot or to the big that's cutting down the middle of the lane. He definitely creates high looks for his teammates. And I think that gets overlooked when you look at Cody Matin, because to your point, he is very much a Steve Clifford type of player, because defensively, he's able to guard multiple positions. And I would agree with you in the sense that he is pound for pound the best player on that end of the court. But you can't overlook some of the playmaking that he does have. He's not necessarily like a primary initiator by any means, but I do think he has a little bit of that in him. So very interested to see how that shot is maintained throughout the course of the season. Is he closer to 40% like he was last year, or is he like he was in his first two seasons? But yes, the contract is very, very fair. And
I think with the news that came out the other day that the salary cap is going to go up by even more than they thought, you know, the signing is just going to look better and better. And you got the new TV money, I think, in maybe 2 years, which Cody Martin's contract will still be on the books after that. So really, like, if you think $8 million is okay value now, in like 3 or 4 years, $8 million is going to be like absolutely nothing whatsoever. So I think it works. I think the big thing for Cody is, can he evolve that ball handling? You remember in his first summer league season, they played him at point guard, and they wanted to see him with the ball in his hands. And I don't think they'll kind of start that this year, but I'm still interested, as he's now more comfortable in the NBA, that could he be a potential backup ball handling option on this team down the road? I don't know, but it's something I think that the team will be keen to explore.
When you're drafting your fantasy team, do you ever wish you could do the same thing with your business team? If you're building a roster to win the league, you need Indeed. Hate waiting? Indeed's U.S. data shows over 80% of Indeed employers find quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match their job description the moment they sponsor a job. Something I love about Indeed is that it makes hiring super easy, like their instant match. Indeed does the hard work for you. Sponsor a job and boom, Instant Match shows you candidates whose resumes on Indeed fit your job description immediately after you post. With Instant Match, you can start hiring fast. Indeed knows that when you're doing everything for your company, you can't afford to overspend on hiring. Visit Indeed.com/Blue Wire to start hiring now. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Cost per application pricing not available for everyone. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Ooh, you know what that means. That's the sound of a business making another sale on Shopify, the one commerce platform to start, run, and grow your business. Shopify makes it simple for anyone to sell anywhere, from creating your store in your look to finding new customers to scaling your idea, anywhere your future holds. With Shopify, you can do it all from one place with no need for skills in design or code. It's how every minute of every day, something amazing happens. A new seller makes their first sale with Shopify, and you can too. I love how Shopify makes starting your own business possible for anyone, including me. Now it's your turn to start selling today with Shopify for free. Go to shopify.com/Blue Wire, all lowercase, for a free 14-day trial and get full access to Shopify's entire suite of features. Start selling on Shopify today. Go to shopify.com/Blue Wire right now. Shopify.com/Blue Wire.
So taking a step back, obviously that was like the biggest quote unquote signing for the Hornets this offseason, which is kind of an issue here. So they've been very inactive. And I actually shared my thoughts when I joined the Knicks Film School pod not too long ago. But I want your thoughts. How much of the Hornets' inactivity can be attributed to the Miles Bridges legal stuff? And how much of that is just kind of being used as an excuse to not make any moves? And they're just kind of waiting on everything revolving around him.
Well, if you want to believe Mitch Kupchak, the goal this offseason was to retain Miles Bridges and Cody Matin. And that was essentially what he said at his draft press conference, that was what they were looking to do. And they don't foresee them making a splash in free agency. Obviously, they resigned Cody Matin. Miles Bridges is the big question mark. So I think I will say I wouldn't always believe what Mitch Kupchak says in press conferences, because what he said before is definitely not always the case. I do think this Miles Bridges situation has definitely paralyzed them. I mean, the timing of this, remember, I think it was the night before free agency opened or something of that nature, where like if you knew it 2 weeks going into free agency, maybe more, but you're still probably fact-finding at that point if you're the Hornets, trying to understand what's happened, what could the likely outcomes be. So I do have quite a lot of sympathy here for Charlotte's front office. I'm not someone being like outraged that they're not doing anything. They've talked about developing the players and player development being the basis for them to get better. And I think that's what they're banking on. I don't think they're ever planning to make major shifts this offseason. But I mean, just from the lack of training camp invites, I think Charlotte have the most open roster spots, including training camp. I think they maybe have 7 right now, which is the most in the NBA. So I think you're not even seeing guys signed for training camp reported right now. I do just feel that Charlotte are in a holding pattern while they try and get clarity. Now, they can't be in a holding pattern much longer because training camp opens in, 2-3 weeks? So we're going to start having to see something shift here.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you in terms of having a little bit more sympathy for the Hornets front office because of this whole situation with Miles Bridges. But I want a prediction from you. Do you think he ever plays for the Hornets or maybe the NBA ever again? Or do you think there's just going to be like a minor suspension on the NBA's part?
I don't think it'll be a minor suspension. I think it'll be probably maybe one of the biggest suspensions for domestic violence the NBA has seen. Do I think he'll play in the NBA again? Probably. Will it be with the Hornets? I'm not sure. Sometimes, I don't know why, but the way these things sometimes seem to play out is the player kind of disappears from the NBA, the team moves on, and then they kind of latch on elsewhere to another team later down the road where maybe there wouldn't be quite as big a backlash to kind of if they were to go back to the team they were on when the incident happened. I don't know why that's the case, but it's just how it seems to go. But if I'm being cynical, they'll reach an out-of-court settlement rather than this going to trial and the trial lasting for however many years. And, Miles has got the money to pay for an out-of-court settlement. And right. It's just the way that, I'm not an expert on the US justice system, but that's where a lot of these things with famous people and rich people seem to end up is non-disclosure agreements and out-of-court settlements. So I wonder if it will head that direction, but I'm just guessing. I'm not sure. Prediction, the fact that they didn't pull the qualifying offer, which we think they could have done, we don't know. There is an option there that the Charlotte's hands are tied until the legal actions are done before they make any decisions. Otherwise, they could be liable potentially for prosecution for kind of wrongful dismissal and stuff of that nature. But there is potential that they could have pulled the qualifying offer and they didn't. So the fact that they didn't, I would lean towards he will be back at some stage, at some point. But I don't know. I'm guessing just as much as everybody else is.
Yeah, definitely. And to your point, I'm actually no legal expert either. So you being across the pond doesn't really make much of a difference there. So, but obviously one move that they do need to make, whether that's through trade or through a signing, is acquiring a backup point guard. Obviously they can't go into the season with the mixture of Cody Matin, like you mentioned, playing his first summer league with the ball in his hands a lot, and Rozier as really the only ball handlers outside of LaMelo. And they can't really be used that often as initiators in the second group, in my opinion. They obviously need a solidified backup point guard. Now, Obviously, the Hornets still have like the non-taxpayer mid-level or the biannual, but at this point, there aren't many options left, and clearly they aren't really competing against anyone else for the remaining crop of players that are out there. So who would you, if you were Mitch Kupchak, who would you pinpoint as the backup one? Would it be Kemba if Detroit buys him out? Would it be Elfrid Payton? Would it be Isaiah Thomas? Somebody else?
For me, it would be Kemba, probably as a no-brainer. That's assuming that LaMelo is okay with it, and I think you do probably have to run that past LaMelo's camp to be like, this is what we're thinking, because you don't want to be annoying your franchise player by bringing back the old franchise star. So I think Kemba, just from his leadership point of view, his familiarity with Clifford, he could be a kind of a real conduit, I think, for the team and Steve Clifford. He understands the franchise. Again, everyone speaks glowingly of Kemba Walker. I think Isaiah Thomas would be next on my list, even though I don't think he's a Steve Clifford type player, but just for the off-court stuff, it's very clear the players on the roster last year really valued Isaiah Thomas, and he was very popular. So I think he would probably be next. And then Elfrid Payton, I'm just really not that interested in. But yeah, I think for me, it'd be Kemba 1, clear 1, Isaiah Thomas a clear 2 as my options.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, the needle movers are obviously gone, and I actually tend to lean the opposite with the 1-2. I tend to lean Isaiah Thomas. I think there's a part of me that does want Kemba back in a Charlotte uniform, but maybe it's just more for the story. Obviously, I think he's going to retire a Charlotte Hornet at some point, and he calls Charlotte home, but again, I'm not really sure how much it matters, but my preference would be IT. I think the continuity in the locker room and that veteran presence that is needed for such a young team is a factor, like why I would target him. But he does offer some things on the court too. Like obviously both him and Kemba are undersized, but he's a really good pull-up shooter from both inside and outside the arc. He can make things happen late in the shot clock with the ball in his hands, whether that's through creating for others or through like scoring. And to your point, like Kemba has played with Clifford before, but there's just something about the way that season ended with Isaiah Thomas and how he made connections with a lot of the players on the team and they all looked up to him. I felt like PJ Washington, for example, just kind of grew close to him, even though they're not the same position. On defense, neither Kemba nor Thomas are really going to make that much of a positive impact. But I think that Thomas, like just by the optics and his personality, like he shows some grit and some effort, and that at least gives me a little bit more satisfaction when I watch a player on that end. He's certainly going to get beat, but I don't think it's necessarily going to be because of effort. But like if you were to look at like a Kelly Oubre, for example, the result might be the same, but he just kind of has this lackadaisical attitude about him on that end of the court. So that's one thing that I can pinpoint about Thomas, just his like personality on the court, but also within the locker room as well.
I think for me, the key thing is I think if Isaiah Thomas is on the roster, I don't know if Steve Clifford definitely plays him as the backup point guard. I wonder if Steve Clifford tries to navigate with Terry Rozier, with Cody Matin, maybe with James Bucknight, although I think that's less likely. Whereas with Kemba, I know Clifford trusts Kemba. And Kemba's best years were playing with Steve Clifford in the system. So I think that's my biggest hang-up on Isaiah. I think off the court, I think he's probably the better option because it's not it's like we just speaking of soccer at the start. It's like Ronaldo returning to United. Everyone's really happy. And then now we're stuck with him and we're trying to move on from him and it's all a bit awkward. Like those reunions don't often end that well when someone's kind of coming off the seasons that Kemba is like. But I think that for me is just a tiebreaker. I don't know Steve Clifford. He'll want to play the 5'9" Isaiah Thomas. He's just so big on size and defense and defensive rebounding. And I know Kemba doesn't excel at any of those things, but there's an established level relationship between them.
Yeah, he's got a little bit of a leg up on IT on the height department, but I can see that side to making that point to get Kemba instead of IT. So regardless, though, that hole at the backup point guard position, I really don't see it making that huge of a difference.
No, I mean, look, it was Ish Smith last year, Isaiah Thomas, who even was it the year before? I'm blanking now, but like they've kind of it's been a revolving door, hasn't it? Backup point guard for a long time now, and you've never felt that the backup point guard play is the thing holding this team back over the last however many years.
So, yeah, like I said, regardless of who they go for in the backup point guard position, and obviously with Bridges seemingly out of the picture, this team is likely projected to miss the play-in altogether. I would assume. I could probably name 9 to 10 teams in the East that I feel more confident right now to finish above the Hornets. Now, having said that, how do you think the Hornets are approaching this season? Everyone keeps overusing this like term, the gap year. Like, do you feel that once again that the Hornets are going to just take another year, not a year off, but like it just feels like they're just trying to develop these young players and just see how far they can go with that, with some of the veterans sprinkled in. So what's the approach this year?
Richie, the first 2 words in my notes for this section are gap year. So you just said that. No, I think, look, the way I phrase this is if it was me in charge, I would do a gap year. I don't think the Hornets are going to do that at all. I think they're going
what does the gap year mean to you? Because I don't really understand this term. I mean, I understand what, taking a year off, a gap year, but like, is that purposely like trying to like just play the young guys as much as possible?
It's playing your young players, giving them priority in the rotation over some of your older guys, probably trading some of the vets away to enable you to do that without making things awkward. And that by the end of the year, you really know what you've got in Kai Jones, James Bucknight, Nick Richards, Mark Williams, JT Thor. You know which of those you might want to invest in and which of those you want to maybe kind of move on from. And with that, you might play Gordon Hayward, not play him on back-to-backs to kind of open up playing time. You might look to move one of the vets, Mason Plumlee or something of that nature. I think that's what the gap year looks like. I don't, and you're probably finishing 5 wins, maybe less than if you were trying to win every game. But I mean, Steve Clifford isn't going to coach a game to lose. He'll put the best players in at the end. And that's why I don't think that's realistic to expect. But in terms of what I think is best for the franchise, that's what I think the long term would be the best approach to be. But I think that's too difficult with the vets on the roster unless you're trading away Hayward, Rozier. And at that point, your fans are probably up, complaining, being like, what, Miles Bridges is suspended and now you're trading away the good players? Like, what are you doing with LaMelo's, as he's coming to his rookie contract, he's going to want out now. Like, I think the backlash would be too far, and the team have kind of really committed to trying to compete while develop at the same time. So I think more likely they will try and win with this group, bet on internal development. They kept a lot of the player development staff from the Borrego staff. Hope that the improved health, I should say, of Gordon Hayward helps this team and helps make up for some of the Miles Bridges vacancy, and that Miles might come back after 40 games, 50 games. I'm not sure. The other way they could go for it is they, if Miles is confirmed out or is going to not be back on this team, is they look at some of the kind of big dominoes that haven't fallen yet that are involved in trade talks. So you've got the likes of Russell Westbrook, Julius Randle, who I know you did the Knicks pod with, John Collins, Eric Gordon, Miles Turner, our good old friend, should always mention him, who are kind of guys who are out there and teams obviously want to trade, and maybe Charlotte pivot to one of those if it is clear that Miles Bridges will never, ever be back. So that's kind of also where I wonder they might potentially do. But it's just a weird time to make trades right now. I know the Mitchell kind of felt like the biggest one that was left, but those guys are out there and those teams do clearly want to move on from some of those players.
I actually see it more of a realistic path, not like this is my preferred path, but I almost feel like they would almost go that route of trying to trade for a Julius Randle or I guess Russell Westbrook might not be a trade that tries to improve them on the court, but try to find a guy that can fill the scoring of Miles Bridges. I could see that happening more than I could see them just trying to just play their young guys, as much as possible. I do think it's going to probably fall somewhere in the middle. I think it's going to fall somewhere in the middle where they just play Plumlee, play Hayward as much as possible, play Rozier as much as possible, and then just sprinkle in the young guys. So I'm not sure that really is defined as a gap year. But as we stand here today, I think the best case in terms of just trying to where they finish, and it's not necessarily where I think they should be aiming for, is like 10th place. And I think that's generous. Like, Bucks, 76ers.
It's such a, let's be honest, this is quite a sad existence to be like 10th place. Yeah. Let's go. I mean, I don't know if I can do another playing game, Richie. I've done the last 2 years and they've both been somehow more painful the last one. I don't know if I can do another.
Exactly. Exactly. So you just rather them not be in the play-in altogether.
Yes, but again, we're talking long term here. I just don't think that's the way the franchise and front office and ownership and coaching are wired at all. I don't think they're going to do the Tim Duncan. This is one thing I wonder, like, if they were to get a big injury early in the season, someone out for the year, and they start 2-8, I wonder if at that stage they kind of see what they've got and they kind of they play the cards that they're dealt. I wonder if that would change their approach to the season than if they started, 7-4 and everyone's healthy. But I think, like you say, realistically, to be in line for the 10th seed, there's going to have to be some major steps taken by some of the younger players on this roster.
Yes. Yeah, because those teams that are kind of like in that 8, 9, 10 spot, like they would have to pass like a Bulls or a Knicks to kind of finish ahead of them. But that's like a best case scenario to me. I feel like they're going to finish like 11th or 12th in the East. But we will see what acquisitions they make and kind of what direction they go with. And as they are progressing through this 82-game schedule, and when it's all said and done, I want to know from you in terms of these. I'm going to list some front court players for the 22-23 season, and I want you to rank them in terms of the amount of impact they will have this season. So here are the 4 players, and just in terms of this upcoming season: Jalen McDaniels, Kai Jones, JT Thor, Mark Williams. Those 4. I want you to rank them and give me a reason why. As like what kind of impact they're going to have. 1 obviously being the most impactful.
So I think number 1 is pretty clear, and that's Jalen McDaniels. I think he's good, the best defender. I think in terms of like most versatile defender out of that group right now. He makes very few mistakes, which we know from Steve Clifford. Like, if you're making mistakes, scheme errors, losing guys and back cuts, that's what Steve Clifford hates. If you miss shots, he doesn't mind as long as you're doing the right thing. And I think Jalen McDaniels does that. He plays with high energy. He's always everywhere on the floor. You always feel him when he's out there. He's, 86th percentile in defensive rebounding, 95th percentile in block rate. He improved as a 3-point shooter. And there's going to be a more opportunity there at those 3-4 positions because of Miles Bridges' vacancy, either for the whole year or part of the year. So I think Jalen McDaniels is a very clear and strong number 1 for me.
Okay, before you go to 2, 3, 4, I would agree. Like, obviously, he's the most polished of these players. He's seen the most court time. I agree 100% that, that opportunity right there where Miles Bridges is gone and all those, the gap in minutes that have been left behind by him, he has an opportunity to fill that. And I also have a feeling that Clifford is really just going to like his play style and attacking the boards on both ends and just having some versatility, as you say, on both sides of the court, but especially on the defensive side, and just using his length to disrupt. So I guess I'm more interested about 2, 3, and 4. So I want to hear that.
Number 2, yeah, this is where it gets trickier. I think my number 2 and 3 are quite close, and I could flip these depending on how long I think about it. Number 2, I go Mark Williams. I think team need in terms of a lob threat, a defensive rebounder, an elite kind of rim protector. Clifford is familiar with Mark even before this year. Like he said, he had those 2-3 day visit down in Duke, and he visited them there. And I think Steve Clifford was very much a proponent, reading between the lines, of the drafting of Mark Williams. So I think that's good. He plays a simple game. He plays to his strength. He doesn't try and do stuff outside of his remit, which we might get to here with another one of these players. I think it just strikes me as a kind of player who Steve Clifford will like. And even though he's a rookie, which I understand Steve Clifford has a history of maybe not playing rookies, I think he plays a position of need that his team needs to get fresher at. And I just think his skill set fits really well. And playing with LaMelo will actually very much help him rather than playing with Jalen Crutcher in summer league. So I went Mark Williams number 2.
All right, I'm in agreement. Again, I do have Mark Williams number 2, and you say you have 2 and 3 close. So to me, my 1 and 2 were kind of fairly easy. The 3 and 4 is which kind of flip-flop before, but there's nothing really more to add than what you had said there, James. But I do think he might be brought along slowly in the beginning of the season, but I think when it's all said and done, when you look at the full 82-game season, I think his defensive presence on that back end will just be too hard to keep him off the court. I'm not saying that he's going to start over Plumlee by any means, but he could see more minutes by, January, February. And he's going to alter shots. Like you saw that in Summer League, not even on blocks, like just making ball handlers who are driving towards the rim second guess. Some even traveled because they were hesitant on going up. So Mark Williams is definitely my number 2. 3 and 4 is kind of where I flip-flopped. But I think I feel pretty confident on my number 3 here. But I'll let you go and finish it off here with the 3-4.
Yeah, I mean, just to Mark Williams, I mean, I was at NBA Summer League this year, and I don't understand the national media and draft analysts who kind of said Mark Williams didn't look great in Summer League. I thought he looked great in limited minutes with poor point guard play, and he just impacted the game from the minute he came in. Just the other team's offense changed, and everything the other team's players did, and he was just a presence. So I thought he had a really good Summer League. He just didn't put up great box score numbers. So anyway, moving on to number 3, JT Thor for me. I think Clifford will love his size and his length, his defensive potential. He shot the ball well as Summer League progressed, and we saw flashes of that last year. He's got versatility to play the 3 and the 4. They wanted to see him at the 3 early in Summer League, and it didn't really go so well, but they shifted him to the 4. But I just think he plays like a role player, and he could fit into that. And we already saw him get some rotation minutes last year. And again, he also benefits from that Miles Bridges gap, right? If Jalen McDaniels were to get injured, if PJ Washington would get injured, you'd think JT Thor would be in line. Whereas at the center position, you've got Nick Richards, Mark Williams, Kai Jones, Mason Plumlee. There's 4 players there who are mostly one position players and are kind of going to be behind 1, 2, 3, 4 guys. So I went JT 4th, JT Thor 3rd. That's a mouthful.
That is a mouthful. Yeah, we're going to be in agreement here on this 4. I thought we were going to have some differences at the 3 and 4, but yeah, JT Thor for me at number 3. I do think, to your point about the opening at the 3/4 position, that applies to Jalen McDaniels, but that also applies to JT Thor. I will say this: I came away more underwhelmed by JT Thor than I did Kai Jones at Summer League. But I do have him, slightly above Kai Jones just for my projected impact. Maybe it's mainly because of the minutes that he could potentially get. I do think that his skill set is very similar to Jalen's, but he still is lacking a handle and lacking a shot at this point. So he's obviously not going to climb up until into the tier of Jalen McDaniels. He's got to get stronger, but ultimately I think he will get more minutes than Kai Jones, who I also have ranked 4th like you. I'll go ahead and talk about Kai Jones here. You kind of mentioned it. He's just behind a lot of players, and you didn't even mention PJ Washington, playing at the 5, occasionally. And objectively, I think Kai looked much better at the 5 than the 4 in Vegas. I think the biggest reason for that was like the 5s that he was playing with, Mark Williams, Nick Richards, and this would be the case with Plumlee too, to an extent. Like if they can't stretch the court with their shot, which they don't, then Kai has got to stretch the court with his shot, and he really hasn't proven that yet. Obviously it's only been 1 full season in a summer league, so I think maybe pairing him with PJ Washington would actually be a good pairing on both ends of the court, because you do have a stretch 5 with PJ, but when he's not playing with someone that can do that, his impact drops drastically. So he's a much better pick and roll big than he is a pick and pop big at this point in his career. And him getting a full head of steam, attacking the rim, like that's when you saw those highlight plays with Kai Jones. So even though Kai Jones is flashier than JT Thor, I think his impact this upcoming season, who knows? Maybe he spends some time in Greensboro again.
Yeah, and I loved what I saw out of Kai Jones in Greensboro last year. I didn't love what I saw in Summer League. They tried to play him at the 4 next to Nick Richards, and this is one of the reasons I had Kai 4th, is because I think this coaching staff, when I say Steve Clifford, I think he really likes Nick Richards. I think that was clear in Summer League, and I spoke to Nick while I was there, and it was clear that Nick was enjoying the new system, was enjoying the new approach. He wasn't being asked to stretch the floor and try a 3-point shot. He was just allowing himself to be him. It wouldn't surprise me if Nick Richards is heavily involved in the rotation to start the year. But yeah, like you said, I think the big thing with Kai Jones is just mistake prone. with reckless turnovers, trying to do a little bit too much, maybe taking an ill-advised 3-point shot here or there. The 3-point mechanics just look different in summer league to they did last year in Greensboro, which was just strange. I don't know what to put that down to, but I just think it's the mistakes. There's just too many mistakes, really, mainly on offense. Actually, defensively, he was contesting a lot of shots in Vegas. He was rebounding the ball pretty well. Yeah. It was just on the offensive end. I don't feel like you can. The things will kind of break down a little bit unless he's dunking the ball at the rim, which I think if you're just limiting him to catching lobs, well, Mark Williams can do that too, yet he gives you a lot more on the defensive end. So I hate it because I really like Kai as a person, and I liked the pick when they made it. And I still do think there's a potential role, but it's just a very crowded front court. And that's my concern with Nick, Kai, Mark, Mason, PJ, if he plays some 5. It's just not been a great opportunity for Kai Jones to come into to develop.
Agreed. So, yeah, it probably speaks more to the opportunity that he may or may not get this upcoming season. So, yeah, we have the same 4 here with Jalen, Mark, JT, and Kai as projected impact for the upcoming season. So, we're kind of getting towards the end here, James, and we have a handful of people here in Twitter Spaces. If anyone would like to request to speak, we'll definitely take a question. But we do have a listener question that we got prior to the recording of this show here, and it's from Eric Cooper. It says, does Cody Matin start over Terry, given Clifford's defensive mindset, similar to what he did with MKG? So I'll give my thoughts just really quick before passing it off to you, James. But the short answer, I would say no. I think that Terry Rozier gives this team too much gravity scoring for him to be shifted to a bench role. And obviously a team that is losing a 20-point scorer can't afford to shift his ability to get buckets from behind the arc. I will say this, though. I think Clifford has learned and adapted as the years have gone on. Like, he certainly still has his methods, his ways, his philosophies. He's always going to be a defensive first guy, but I do think that he realizes that the team that he's inheriting is centered around LaMelo. It's centered around, pushing the pace. It's predicated on the offensive side of the ball. And I don't think he wants to mess with that. He just wants to come in and put his imprint on the defensive side of the court without messing with the offensive side. So that's kind of my quick answer to this. I don't think that Cody is going to start over Rozier. Cody, like we just mentioned at the top of the podcast, great signing, but Terry just gives way too much offensive punch, especially when Miles Bridges isn't in the picture.
So this is a great question, and I'm really was it Eric who asked it? I'm really happy that we asked it because I've shared this on my own podcast, All Hornets Podcast Network, that I do wonder about this because we know that LaMelo and Rozier, as a backcourt, are 2 subpar defenders. And I think Steve Clifford will be looking at this all summer and going, right, I'm going to give them a chance. They are the starters heading into training camp, but I'm going to be asking a lot of them defensively. And if one of them takes a jump that they can start guarding better perimeter players, then I think that kind of solves it because you can normally try and hide one. You look at someone like Terrence Ross in Orlando, who always came off the bench. No matter, he was one of the better players on that team, and he was still coming off the bench.
And he averaged 40 points against the Hornets, right? Like, he just always lights up.
Always. One of those guys, absolutely. Then I looked into this more, Richie, and this is where I think it's really interesting. Maybe Cody Matin doesn't start instead of Rozier. Maybe Cody Matin starts alongside Rozier. So I looked at some numbers last year. Cody Matin and LaMelo on the floor with no Rozier was minus 1.3. So not great. Terry Rozier and LaMelo with no Cody Matin was plus 1.3. So again, fine. Melo plus Rozier plus Martin on the floor was plus 5. 123 offensive rating, 118 defensive rating. Now I can hear people going, well, where's Gordon Hayward going? What if we shift Gordon Hayward to power forward? A couple of guys who played over 50% of their minutes at power forward last year. Bogdanovic for the Utah Jazz, DeMar DeRozan, Tobias Harris, Joe Ingles, Doug McDermott. All of them played between 70 to 90% of their minutes at power forward. And I wonder with Hayward slowing down a little bit, that you shift Hayward to power forward, And then you can start all three of those guys, where you've got a good defender in Cody Matin on the floor. And this is not something I'd really come across before prepping for this podcast. But all of a sudden, I thought, well, if Miles is missing, everyone's assuming, like we said, PJ Washington, Jalen McDaniels. But we could still see some PJ at the 5. And we could maybe see some Gordon Hayward at the 4. So it was just something I thought was interesting, as I've not heard many people talk about it, and could be an option open to the team, because there's a lot of versatile players in this roster. You could patch it together a lot of ways, but that was just something that I came across.
Interesting. I guess, my only issue with that is playing against bigger, stronger opponents. And yes, Gordon is definitely slowing down, and the injuries are hampering him a little bit in terms of his athleticism. He's always been like a physical type of player, but if you do play bigger teams, that could be a bit of an issue. But that's an interesting stat to have all three of those players on the court at the same time. It kind of balances out some of the weaknesses with Cody Martin's defense. So very good, very good. Okay, we're going to end with rapid fire questions here, James. These are mostly Hornets questions, but I do have some other just random questions for you. So better, because you're a Man U fan, better Man U player of all time. Who ranks higher on your list, Beckham or Rooney?
Rooney, by a mile. David Beckham was overrated. He came to America to hide from the judgment of British people who all knew David Beckham was overrated. So, yeah, he looked good. Yeah, he took great free kicks, but he wasn't that great a player. Wayne Rooney is one of the best players of a generation. Not close.
Okay. All right. I was hoping to make it close, but I guess I don't know my Man U history as much as you do, obviously. So, all right. Who will finish in higher in the Premier League this year, Arsenal or Man U?
Arsenal. I don't think that was particularly close either. Even as a Man United fan, I mean, we lost to Real Sociedad the other night to a questionable handball. Let's talk about VAR again. No, I think Arsenal have got a really good squad this year. I think it will be more interesting as Europa League starts, and I don't think Arsenal's depth is maybe quite as good. And United, I thought, was a little stronger until I watched the Europa League game the other night. But I just think, Mikel Arteta now into multi-year in his culture and system is a little bit more established than Ten Hag, who's still kind of building it up on the way.
Yeah.
And an injury seemed to be a problem for a lot of United's forward players. So I'm giving you Arsenal now. I
appreciate it. I thought maybe your homerism would come into play there. That's why I thought it would be a little bit more difficult for you. But did you ever watch the All or Nothing on Amazon with Arsenal for last season?
I did watch it. Yeah.
Do you like those things at all? Like getting an inside look at the teams?
You see, I love Hard Knocks. So I watched Hard Knocks for the Detroit Lions this year. I thought that was great. I hated the Arsenal All or Nothing, but I have enjoyed some of the All or Nothings. I just felt, that particular one, it was just a lot of Mikel Arteta team talks before and post games, and I just thought it got a little bit repetitive, and it was just like, oh, what quirky thing is Arteta going to do this time? And I found it a little bit dull personally, and also because it was so recent, I knew how it played out. Whereas sometimes when you watch those All or Nothings, you're like watching, I don't know, the New Zealand rugby team, and you don't know what happens, and it's a little bit more interesting that way. So I wasn't a huge fan of that. I thought Mikel Arteta I'm not going to be honest, he really annoys me. He's always so animated on the sidelines and is calling for everything. He winds me up a little bit. So I did watch it. I wasn't a huge fan, but I do like those sort of, I don't even call them documentaries. They're not documentaries. They're coordinated PR stories, really. I think you need to have an independent person to call it a proper documentary, but I do enjoy them from time to time.
I'm not even sure if I watched the last episode of that now that I'm thinking about it, because
you wanted to miss the Tottenham game where they lost and get the Champions League. That's why you didn't watch the last episode. I actually knew one of the guys on there on the All or Nothing getting interviewed. I was watching it. And it was before the Tottenham Arsenal game. And I was like, I played poker with the guy. And I was like, I know him. And I messaged him afterwards. He was like, yeah, they really stitched me up because they interviewed me before the Tottenham game. And I told them we were going to win 3-0 and make Champions League. And then literally the next scene was them losing and they missed out on Champions League. So,
yeah, that's probably why I didn't watch it. It was probably a subconscious thing, knowing how it ended. But all right, but back to this rapid fire. Better uniform. So try to think about the city uniforms that Charlotte wore last year with the script name, the gradient jersey, and the pinstripes, or the one from 2 seasons ago where it was the mint and gold. Do you get into uniforms that much? Which one do you
mint
like?
Mint and gold.
Okay.
I didn't love mint and gold at the start, but I really feel like the fan base embraced it, and I thought they looked pretty good on the court. So I'll go mint and gold.
Yeah, the one thing I just don't like about the mint, I mean, I like the look of the mint and gold, but just because of the fact that it's not teal and purple, like it just kind of doesn't look like the Hornets, but I do think the colors go well together.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Better owner / worse owner, Michael Jordan versus Bob Johnson.
I thought you were going to say the Glazers for United then. That would have been a tough one. It has to be Bob Johnson. It has to be Bob Johnson. I mean, the team very much left Charlotte essentially under Bob Johnson. I think we just did me and Chase on our podcast made a little Hornets Hall of Fame. And in that podcast, we actually discussed Michael Jordan is in the Hornets Hall of Fame, whether we like it or not. Like the first black owner, the first ex-player owner. He was GM of the team. He's now owned the team for however long. I don't think you can tell the story of the Charlotte Hornets without Michael Jordan. So, yeah, I think Michael Jordan. But I mean, you're picking between. I mean, I'm not going to finish the sentence, but it's not the greatest choice. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that's why I posed it. So name a Hornets player, whether it was like a drafted player or maybe just even an acquisition, a trade, that when the Hornets acquired them, like you were so excited, you were so high on this player, but this player ended up being worse than you expected.
That's a really great question. And then I'll say it just because it's fresh in my mind and I don't want to take this too long for quick fire. Probably Kai Jones. I had Kai Jones, I think, rated 11th or 12th in the draft. And I was just so excited that the Hornets got aggressive and traded back into the first round, which is something we've not seen them do, I think, since before the draft. They traded in for Bismack Biyombo, but I loved the kind of aggressive move. And I thought there was potential there that he could stretch the floor a little bit more and handle the ball. So Kai Jones is probably one so far, but there's still time to be proved wrong there. But Kelly Oubre as well. I said many times last year that Kelly Oubre was going to be the best defender on the team last year, which is not a take that aged well at all. But I still maintain, like, going into last season, Kelly Oubre is probably the most proven NBA defender because he has had moments where he has been good on defense. But, I mean, look at all the advanced analytics. Look at the tape. Last year, he was lackadaisical on defense. So that was also probably another one. I really like the Kelly Oubre signing. Worked out for different reasons because his offense was obviously, he was just a different player last year. It was like someone transformed into Kelly Oubre's body.
All right, last one. Hornets will make the play-in for the 22-23 season. True or false?
I'm going to go true just because I think they could make, like you say, that big all-in chip, well, not all chips in, but a trade to fill out the roster. And we're due for some good injury luck, right? You know, Gordon Hayward missing half the year, this Miles Bridges thing. Someone's got to go right for us. So I'll say make the play-in, scrape in by the skin of the teeth.
All right. As we wrap, I know most people who listen to our podcast are probably very familiar with you, James, but I'm sure there might be a handful that don't know. So go ahead and let everyone know what you've got going on and how they can find your work online.
Yeah, so I'm site publishing manager right now over at SI All Hornets. So if you type in Sports Illustrated Hornets or allhornets.com, you'll be able to go through our website. We've got a team of 10 writers for the upcoming year. I'm really excited about what we're building over there. So our goal is to become kind of the go-to place for all Hornets news analysis, breaking news, in-depth articles, interviews. We've got a player at every single game this year covering for media access. So really pumped about that. Other than that, you can also check out the All Hornets podcast network. It's a one podcast stream, but with 2 or 3 different hosts on there. Me and Chase do a show. We have Tim and Mark over at Hornets and Heartbreak who do the show. We've got a couple of things in the work for the season. Laquan Robinson, who's based around the corner from the Greensboro Swarm, is going to be doing a podcast, and he's essentially going to be a semi-beat reporter for the Greensboro Swarm this year. So if you want a slightly different take, finding out about the Greensboro team, we definitely suggest you go for the All Hornets podcast network, and you can rate, review, and subscribe there. So allhornets.com, All Hornets podcast network. You can find me on Twitter at British_Buzz. And those are all my plugs.
So definitely give him a follow on Twitter, give the podcast a listen, and stay tuned for All Hornets. Is that what it's called? All Hornets?
All Hornets, that's right. And if you haven't already, to help Richie out here, make sure you subscribe to Buzz Beat Plus too, because they got some great content on there, and you can get your Hornets podcast, no ads, right away, straight away after they've been recorded. So make sure you sign up for that as well if you haven't already.
All right. I appreciate it, man. And I will talk to you later. We'll have to get you on soon.
Yep. Sounds good. Always happy to come on. And yeah, let's bring on training camp.